Welcome to the Franchise Woman Podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zoracle Profiles. Tracy Cowa is not with us today. She's doing a training for a company, but I have an incredible guest with me. Tracy, I'm going to pronounce it Panase. Did I do that right?
Close. Panase.
Panase, it's French almost.
I think it's Italian. That's what my husband
Is
tells me,
it?
but
Yeah,
French, the French version sounds much better.
yeah, I love it. So Tracy is a very knowledgeable and experienced team and business builder with an impressive 25-year background as a franchisee for two national brands. She stepped into the role of CEO and owner of the Just Between Friends franchise system in December of 2022. Prior to her current position, Tracy held the distinction of being the top performing franchisee within the Just Between Friends, successfully owning and operating four territories in southeastern Pennsylvania. Tracy's rally cry, "Let's go," reflects her contagious enthusiasm as she leads the charge to make Just Between Friends a household name in communities across the country. I am so glad that you could spend some time with me today, Tracy.
I'm thrilled to be here, Rebecca. Thanks so much for having me.
You know what? You've always inspired me, and this whole Just Between Friends story has fascinated me, obviously. So I actually have just an off-the-wall question for you.
Sure.
When you look at your life, in hindsight, can you see any kind of a theme or motto or belief system, something that seems to flow through your life on a consistent basis?
Yes, I think that's a great question. And the last word that you use is actually one of those themes, and that is consistency. I think one of the things that I've learned about myself is that I'm at my best when I'm doing things consistently. And so, as we know, consistency compounds. It's those small daily deposits that we're making. And usually, success, at least in my experience, it's not any one thing, it's all of those small things that ultimately lead to big success. And so I would say that's number one is just consistent effort and the compound effect of that effort. And then the second thing is I'm at my best when I'm confident. And sometimes I need the nudge to just simply raise my hand and to have that confidence to say, I'm ready, put me in, coach. And so I would say those two things, consistency and then just the courage to raise your hand.
I think it's so cool that you recognize that these two things in parallel are running through your life. So let's dig into the first theme that seems to be running, um, in terms of consistency compounds. So was there a moment where you raised, where you learned self-discipline? What caused this consistency? Because trust me, a lot of us are willy-nilly, and sometimes we're focused on that, sometimes we're focused on something else. Where did this come from?
Yeah, I was raised in a very traditional household. I'm the oldest of three girls, and one of the non-traditional parts of growing up was that we moved 13 times before I graduated from high school. And so my dad was with the same company for 42 years. And it was always, we will go where the company tells us to go. And so that I learned a lot about loyalty and just about being a part of a company and what that meant. My dad was also in the military. And so I think that consistency is really embedded in the DNA of people who serve our country, because that's the process, the procedure. I can't say that I fully embraced that as a child, though. Sometimes I think I rebelled against that because it was such a big part of our family. But then the older I got, and certainly as we all know, our parents get a lot wiser the older we get. And I was like, oh, maybe my dad was onto something. And so I started to see patterns in my own life and the principle of like when I was consistent with my eating or with my spending or with just my learning, being a learner of new subjects or new things, that's when I really started to see success. And you mentioned that in the very kind intro, that I've been a part of franchising for 25 years. And so one of the things that drew me into franchising was that people were operating in different parts of the country using a consistent model. And so that was something that I'm like, I can do that. I'm not necessarily the smartest person to figure all these things out, but I am a good learner and I can be a good student when necessary. And so I think that theme of consistency was always very apparent in my life. And I just started to lean into it when I was able to see success. My background is in marketing. And so I started to apply some of those principles consistently, consistently sending out email, consistently posting on social media. And other franchisees would say to me, like, how are you doing so well? And I would say, I don't know. And then when I look back, I was like, oh yeah, there are some patterns here as to what is leading to this success. And it wasn't any one thing, but I think the easiest things to do are the easiest things not to do. It's easy to not eat healthy. It's easy not to post on social media. We get tired, it's boring, it's mundane, but those are generally the things that have the biggest impact. At least that has been my experience.
You're actually talking to some degree around grit, because grit includes this idea of continuing to do and take action towards a particular outcome and being willing to do it day in, day out, even when it's not fun, even when it, is maybe a little bit difficult or a whole lot difficult. This really is part of the overall idea of grit. The other thing I have learned, and I don't know if you've experienced this, is if we do a little bit every day, we don't get as far behind and then all of a sudden kick ourselves for not getting things done or try to do it all at one time. It's also good for the body and the mind to be more consistent. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. I mean, it becomes a habit when you're doing it on a regular basis. And so again, those small consistent things. And in my own life, I mean, I have high performance habits, which include every minute or every morning I start my day, I read for 30 minutes a day. And so at the end of the year, it's that 30 minutes a day equates to stacks and stacks of books. And so when you look at that mountain of books, it's like, wow, how did I do that? But I did it. And what you alluded to is you do it slowly over time. And so it's like eating an elephant. It's one chunk at a time, and I think again, in my role as a franchisee, is sometimes we look at the big goal. I want to be number one, and it's like, how am I going to do that? And it's one step at a time, and not just doing it once, but doing it consistently over time is the key.
It's so simple but difficult, right? As you pointed out, but it ultimately does allow us to have a beautiful harvest. I guess here's my question regarding that, Tracy. I hope people are listening to this message around consistency compounds and become more self-disciplined. How do you stay motivated to do it every day, especially if it's something that's maybe not so fun or maybe a little bit outside of your natural skill sets? How do you stay motivated to do that?
That's a great question. I think to quote Simon Sinek, it's why, having sight and vision as to the big picture, why do we do what we do? Whether it's as a parent, because we want to raise our children to be good and kind citizens, or in business, we want to impact people. Why I do what I do now as the franchisor is because I believed that in our business, success was possible for everyone. And so that was really what drove me to want to leap from franchisee to franchisor, was to have a bigger impact and to lead leaders. And so sometimes I think when we're stuck in those mundane tasks, it's really taking a moment to step back and say, what's the vision? What does a brighter future look like for myself, for my business, for my family, for my spiritual life? And just being able to reflect in that is what motivates me.
So it's finding that why. And Simon Sinek definitely talks a lot about that. I think that why allows us to have the tenacity to be consistent for longer periods of time. Now, for those of us that haven't built the muscle of consistency or tenacity, would it benefit them at all to do smaller whys or smaller goals to do something over, let's say, a quarter or a year rather than a lifetime?
I love that question. And in my current role, coaching a lot of franchisees, that's one of the things I'll encourage them to do is to cut the goal in half, or in a quarter. So it's not like I want to do $1 million in sales. Let's 500,000 or, whatever it is, that is a little bit more attainable. I think that's been helpful in my own journey, is also focusing not on how, but who. Who are people in our sphere of influence that can help us. And one of the most beautiful things I feel of being part of a franchise community is that people are always willing to help. And so as a company with Just Between Friends, one of our core values is we are better together. And so how can we help each other? So I might not have the best skills when it comes to things like pivot tables, or I'm not necessarily data driven. So who within our organization can help with that so that we can still achieve our goals? So I do think that helps in terms of consistency, because when we get mirrored in the how, that's oftentimes, at least when I find myself giving up, like, I don't know how to do that, I'm out. But thinking about it a little bit more holistically, like, there are other people who can help me to achieve that and also help to motivate one another. I think having accountability is a key factor in doing those small, consistent things, whether it's a walking partner or, just somebody who's in an accountability group with you. That to me has always been quite helpful as well.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Tracy, because sometimes we do run out of steam, and having the encouragement of someone on a similar path, or at least someone that believes in your path and can breathe life into you, whether it's come, let's take a walk, right? You should be doing it every day anyway, but you don't want to, or you're exhausted, and a friend comes and says, come, let's do it. It can be something as small as that breathes energy back, brings that passion back. We are, bottom line, meant to be in relationships. And that better together piece has dividends that go beyond anything that we can even measure. Health dividends,
Absolutely.
financial dividends, all of those things. So I also like the idea of accountability. I don't think we have enough of that in life anymore. We let a lot of people slide, including ourselves, right?
I would agree with that.
Oh, it's something else. All right. If you had another tip, you've already given us 2 or 3 good tips. Another tip that says this will help you be more consistent. First and foremost, you said find your why. Secondly, find either some accountability or lean on others that can breathe life into you or encouragement into you. We're better together. Is there any other tips you would have for someone saying, okay, I'm going to listen to Tracy. I'm going to be more consistent. I'm going to do those little things every single day. What other piece of advice would you have?
I think establishing daily rhythms has been helpful for me. I mentioned one of the things, starting each day reading for 30 minutes a day, having good morning and evening habits, which was something I learned through Michael Hyatt in trainings, with that is just, I use the full focus planner. I'm like all into those types of resources. And you can use whatever you want. The best tools are the tools that you use and that are things that speak to you. So those are just some things that I have found to be helpful, and really not trying to focus on doing everything, but doing a few key things every day. So I'll have, my big three objectives for the week. And then every day, what are three things that I'm doing to drive myself closer to that goal? So I keep it simple, that these are things that I have done for years. And I'm always thinking, oh, is there something else I should be doing? But generally what I find in myself is when I go after shiny objects, that's when I stray. When I'm,
Mhm.
when people say you should be using this app, or there's this
Yeah.
great new tool or program, and I will lean in that direction for a short period of time, I get away from things that I know to be true. And so for me, it's just having a general, pretty boring,
Mm.
just set of things that I do consistently every single day.
So almost scheduling it from the sounds of
Mhm.
it,
For
right?
sure,
So
for sure.
you're not only scheduling it, but you are setting priorities. You're saying these are the top three things. I'm going to put it on the calendar. I'm going to do it in the appropriate. So the calendaring and setting priorities is going to. It also chunks things down from the big to the small, right? Which makes it eating that elephant one bite at a time, so to speak. I read the book, I'm trying to think of the gentleman's name, called Habit, a few years ago. And it highlighted some of what you're talking about, Tracy, that the more we can move to routine, we always do it at 6 a.m. We always do this at noon. The more we can move to habit, we always brush our teeth left to right, whatever it is, uh, the more it frees up our minds and our time to do the other things, right? And some of those other things aren't as fun. So this idea that you just have this habit, you just do it. It just is the way it is.
Yeah, put it on autopilot. I mean, that's
Mm.
the less thinking that's involved. I think that is what makes it easy. Just if you think about things like Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg always wearing the black t-shirt, it's
Yeah.
like the uniform. It's just what we do on a regular basis. So I think that is helpful.
Yeah. It's kind of like what Forrest Gump says in the movie, one less thing, right? He had one less thing to worry about when he became a millionaire, one less thing he had to deal with, one less thing we have to think about.
I
Oh,
love that.
I love this conversation, but I do want to learn more about this other theme that you have going on, which is more about raising your hand.
Mhm.
Can you talk more about maybe when that began, um, and how it's affected your life?
Sure. I think one of the things, although I've had success in different areas, I prefer to fly under the radar. And so I think most strong leaders have a high degree of humility. And so I'd like to think that describes me. At least I hope that's the way that others perceive me. And we specifically, that example came to life when my husband and I were celebrating our 30th wedding anniversary, and that was post-COVID 2021 in Turks and Caicos, and both of us are self-employed. And so, as you can imagine, it's difficult to get away. And so I said, I just need to take this one Zoom meeting because the franchise system, and at that time I was a franchisee, had called a special meeting. And so anybody who's a franchisee listening to this podcast, you probably can relate to the fact that that doesn't necessarily conjure up warm and fuzzy feelings, right? It's like special meeting being called, and I'm like, I need to take this Zoom call. And so we were on a beach in Turks and Caicos, And the purpose of the meeting was twofold. Number one was to introduce something which to me was exciting based on this conversation we're having about consistency, was that our franchise system was going to adopt EOS, which is the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And so, as a franchisee who loves systems and processes, I'm like, that's awesome. We really need that, especially coming out of COVID, where an event-based business like ours was dramatically impacted. So that was exciting. The second part of adopting EOS was, if you're familiar with EOS, it's, people need to get it, want it, and have the capacity to do it. And so as a result of that, there were some structural and organizational changes that were announced during that meeting. And so we had never previously had department heads, or, it was just somewhat of an emerging brand. We at that time, we had, I believe it was like 150 units. And so had gone through kind of the roller coaster ride of growing and plateauing and growing again. And so all that to say, I hung up that Zoom call. And again, we're on a beach in Turks and Caicos. And I just turned to my husband and I said, why wasn't I considered for any of those roles? Because it was a pretty major shift that was announced. And he just looked at me and he didn't skip a beat. And he said, Tracy, did you raise your hand? And I was like,
That gives me chills, girl. Did you raise your hand?
did you raise your hand? This is why we were married for 30 years, right? Celebrating our,
Wow.
because he knew me well and he knew that I didn't raise my hand, because I just assumed that, you work really hard and people recognize that you're a high achiever. And I thought it was obvious that I wanted more, but the only person it was obvious to was me. And so that was just a really profound moment where I'm like, yeah, you're right. If I aspire to be more, and at that particular point, I had in my mind come to the conclusion that I loved being a franchisee, but I wanted the ability to impact more people. And so in my head, I had created this scenario where, wouldn't it be awesome if I could lead leaders? I had led my folks in my local community through my individual franchise units, but I really believed that success was possible for everyone at the level that I had achieved success. And so I wanted the opportunity to be able to give that back to our franchise community. And so at that moment, I was like, I really need to, if I do want that, if that's what I felt like I was being called to do, which I did, I needed to share that out loud. And so at that particular time, that was with the founder, because our company was founder led. And so shortly thereafter, when we returned from our vacation, I mustered up the courage to just reach out to the founder and say, hey, if you're ever interested in selling your company, I'd be interested in talking to you. And our founder, Rebecca, and very
Yeah.
kind and huge heart. And she's like, absolutely, I would love to talk to you. And so that started about a 1.5 year conversation that ultimately resulted in the sale of the company. And so none of that would have happened had I not had the courage to raise my hand.
And if your husband hadn't pointed it out.
Yes.
This
Yes.
is
He's a big part of that.
Yeah, this is why we need one another, right? He knew that you would naturally be in the background, and he also saw that you needed to be in the foreground, right? You need to, and you were being prompted, internally to make leaders. And here we go. Took a little shove or a little reminder anyway, and you raised your hand. Um, and I love this story because it was so perfect for Shannon Wilburn, and it was so perfect for you, and it's so perfect for Just Between Friends franchisees, for you to come in at this place and take Just Between Friends to that next level. So I love it. So let me ask you, what's it like coming in second? Coming after the founder. Tell us some more about that.
I think it's an awesome responsibility. And I say that because I know that I am standing on the shoulders of a giant. I knew Shannon as a leader, as a franchisee. I really saw Shannon's leadership on a different level when I attended the International Franchise Association conference for the first time, as the owner of the company, because I saw all of these people who looked up to Shannon in a very different way than I had done previously as a franchisee. And so that to me was like, oh, this is kind of a big deal, because I didn't know that. I hadn't seen that before. So I often say, as you said, it was the gift of going second. And Shannon was very clear with me that she did not want to be a legend. She wanted to leave a legacy. And so I feel the weight of that every single day, that I'm not only responsible to our franchisee, I'm also responsible to her, and to the legacy. And so one of the things that I think we've done well in this transition is that Shannon is still involved with the brand as the brand ambassador. And so we meet every single week. And so primarily our conversations center around culture and, how do we protect the culture? Because that, to me, that's my job. Is I am the chief culture officer of the company. And so when we made the transition, we redefined our mission, vision, and core values to make it sticky. And so that has gone exceedingly well, and with Shannon's support. So I think that could have gone south really fast because she was the founder. She started this company in her living room 26 years ago, and very strong in terms of being a Christian-based company. And so we didn't want to lose that, but we also needed to redefine what that looked like in 2024 in terms of how we present ourselves to the marketplace. And so we just made some slight tweaks in our mission. Our mission is to help families say yes. And what does that mean? We redefined our core values so that folks could not only say them out loud, but decentralize them within their individual communities. So that really became a part of our initiative. And so all that to say, I think that it has been a really huge responsibility, but I think it's gone well because we're walking that path together. Is that Shannon has stepped back and I've stepped up. But there's been that really kind of seamless transition because franchisees know that we are doing it in the best interest of the franchise system. She could have sold the company to private equity. There's lots of different options that were available to her, but what she felt was most important to franchisees was to have someone who knew what it was like to walk in their shoes. And so my mantra to myself over the past year and a half has been, my goal and my job is to lead with empathy and authority. Is like, I know what it's like to be a franchisee. I've been there, I've done that, but this is the direction in which we're going. So painting that clear vision and aim for franchisees has been important, and having the support of the founder has helped us to get to where we're headed, really.
Yeah, empathy and authority. What a great recipe for leadership, right? Rather than do this and this is what I recommend and blah, blah. But there's also this empathy where we understand from firsthand experience, in your case, what the life of a franchisee is and building their businesses. So this is a beautiful story. So go out in the future for me, Tracy, both personally as well as with Just Between Friends. Where are we going? Where are you going? Where's Just Between Friends going?
I love that question. As the visionary, that gets me really excited. our goal with Just Between Friends is to be a household name. And so that it's ambitious, particularly for a smaller brand like ours, but we solve a universal problem. Kids, the reason why I got involved with Just Between Friends, my kids were 8 and 11. They're now 27 and 24, but their kids are always growing. And so we are able to help parents to be able to say yes, to be able to clothe and entertain their kids without breaking the bank. And so, our hope is that we will be able to provide a service nationwide. Right now, we're in 33 states, and we hope to be in 50 states. And then, there is the potential, of course, to service kids all over the world. It's not a domestic problem, it's a global problem. Not really problem, that's not the right word. It's an opportunity
Yeah.
to be able to service them. And so I think as a company, that's what we're clearly focused on, is how do we become a household name? For me personally, I feel like my role is to lead leaders. How do I empower? And Just Between Friends is somewhat unique in that 99% of our owners are women. And so this is a wonderful business in order for women to be able to serve their community and also to continue to be able to serve their family well. Most of our owners have the flexibility in order to, pick their kids up from the school bus or to homeschool their children, and to be able to contribute to their family income, as well as to be able to contribute to local families. And so I want to be able to continue to provide that leadership to leaders so that they can do all the things, and hopefully do it well.
That's one of my favorite things about your business is that it is a flexible business to a certain degree where you can homeschool, and more parents are choosing that. You're helping your own children and the income to the family, as well as helping other families get great products that they need at prices that they can afford. I was a single mom. Trust me, that would have been a big deal for me to have that kind of flexibility and also be able to provide the service and receive something back. So I like your vision. I support your vision. I'm going to come alongside by being a cheerleader with this vision of yours. I want to hit something that we kind of skirted around, and that is, not only were your children raised in the Just Between Friends business, but your husband is now running a couple of locations. Is that correct?
Yes, I mentioned that 99% of our owners are female. My husband is one of the exceptions. When I acquired the company, I'm all in. I mean, that's my personality, is that, my focus shifted from being a franchisee to being the franchisor. And so in order to do that, I needed to divest myself of my franchise locations. It wasn't required, but it was something that I felt like I needed to do to be able to do my job well. But we love serving our community. And we had established, friendships and a team in this area. So we sold 2 of our territories to other qualified franchisees, and they're doing great now, and then retained 2 of them. So he is the franchisee for 2 of the largest locations in the company, which has really been a great asset to me because I'm able to see things through his eyes, which, although he had always been involved in the business, he's involved in things that he wasn't involved with
Yeah.
previously. And so our dinner conversations are quite interesting from time to time, where it's like, why is this not working? Or, we're in the middle of a major tech process right now, which any of your listeners who have gone through changes in technology platforms can probably relate,
Oh,
that
yeah.
can sometimes be painful for franchisees. And so I'll get his feedback as well. And so he's been able to experience that and share those experiences with me, which has been good. And we're able to continue to be able to serve our local communities and really keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening. One of our franchisees recently said that she coined this phrase called "in the racks." And so our sales are these big, huge events, and we have just racks and racks of clothing, generally like 30,000 to 80,000 square feet of racks. And she said she really gets the best insight when she just goes in the racks and listens to customers. And so I thought that's so brilliant, because they're talking about, wow, I just found this, great item at a fraction of the price, or, ooh, there's a stain on here where it's like, oh gosh, we need to do a better job. And so just by being observant, listening to what's happening with our customers in the racks, is just a benefit. And so all that to say that we still have the opportunity to hear what's happening in the racks, to get that direct customer feedback loop, so that we can incorporate those things within the franchise system to help us to be a household name.
I love that your husband's involved, and this is one more thing you can share, and the feedback he can give you is so valuable because he's in the rack, really, in many in many different ways. So it's a wonderful combination. Also, I would think that the stores that you have, that your husband is now running, would act, this is probably not the right word, but I was going to say almost like a prototype, a testing ground, right? If you're going to do something different, or it can be tested right there in real time. So it really has a ton of benefits that he's actively involved and local right where you are. So that's beautiful.
Yeah. So our concept is a little bit different in that we don't have stores. We're not a brick and mortar. We're
Oh, I'm sorry. Right.
event-based.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so we really only have a couple of times a year to test concepts. So you're exactly right, though, that helps us to be nimble. Like if there is an idea that we want to try, and he's generally like, I'll try anything. The Mikey commercials with the cereal, I'll eat anything, John, and who is up for any sort of challenge. So it is quite helpful to be able to have that resource at my disposal.
Yeah. Thank you for distinguishing that. I knew that, but I communicated it poorly. This is a couple of years events. You go rent locations to go in and do these big events. It is not a retail business for those of you considering just between friends. You won't have that kind of commitment.
Right.
Right. And that's a big commitment. And when you're talking 30,000 to 80,000 square feet, you're going to be renting it a couple of times a year and doing these big, beautiful events. So thank you for clarifying that.
Sure.
So I want to know how people could get hold of you and learn more about Just Between Friends.
Yeah, I'd love to connect with anyone. I'm on LinkedIn at Tracy Panase. And then if anyone interested in information about Just Between Friends, our website is probably the best resource for you. And that's just jbfsale.com. And that's our consumer site. So if parents are out there, you've got stuff that you don't know what to get rid of, that's a good resource.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you, Tracy, for spending some time with me today and allowing me to get to know you even more at a deeper level. So thank you for doing that.
My pleasure. It's been so much fun, Rebecca.
And those of you listening in today, like, comment, most importantly, share this interview. Tracy has given us some incredible pieces of advice, all things that we can do. So it's important to share this video with others. And then, of course, we'll see you next week on the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships are forged.